second grade. It's Ms. Hill coming to you for week 7 of social studies. This week we are talking about time periods and sources. All right, you will know you are successful when you can describe the order of events by using designations of time periods such as historical and present times. All right, some vocabulary there are some new vocabulary we're going to be learning this week. So a primary source is a piece of evidence created by someone at the time of the event. Secondary sources is information created by someone who was not present at the event or after the event has already happened. Chronological order, if you remember from last week, it is starting with the earliest time and following the order in which the event occurred. A time period is defined as a time that is different from what was before and what came after. The past is having occurred during a time previous to right now. So yesterday was in the past. I'm so sorry. Let me try that again. The present time is occurring right now. In the present time, you are watching this video. The future has not happened yet. All right, let's talk about these sources. So we have a primary source and secondary source. A primary source is a piece of evidence created by someone at the time of the event. So that could be letters and journals, diaries, government records, computer software, artifacts, autobiographies, and interviews. Now, second grade, you guys are living in a time period of COVID-19. This is super important. You guys are living history right now because the time changed from before COVID-19 and it will change after COVID. The effects of COVID-19 will continue on and be after in the future. So you guys are lucky you are living a historical event right now. And as a primary source, I would encourage you guys to write journals and diaries. Take note of how you felt, what your family did during school closures and being quarantined at home. Make note of those things because it is a primary source. You will be able to share what you did during this time. Artifacts are going to be like things that you've collected over this quarantine and maybe you keep in a box somewhere, or letters that you've written to a friend and they've written you back, or just anything that you find that could be a key to what this historical event looked like for your family. All right, so an autobiography is a book written by you about yourself. So if you wanted to write a book about you during COVID-19 and how you experienced it, you would be writing an autobiography. All right, now a secondary source is information created by someone who was not present at the event or after the event has happened. So years down the road, people are going to write articles and textbooks and biographies and encyclopedias and dictionaries and magazine articles about this time. And those are all going to be called secondary sources. They may or may not have actually lived through this or were a part of it. It's just a part of history and they're writing about it. So those are secondary sources. Now, the most important source, the most reliable source that you can get is a primary source from that person, from the actual event. So if we were talking about the Revolutionary War and we wanted to look at a document from George Washington, a diary entry that maybe he wrote about what was going on during the wartime, that would be a primary source. It came from George Washington himself about that time period. So guys, I want to challenge you guys to create primary sources about COVID-19, about how you are feeling in this, what your family is doing, because from this time, this is such a history this is such a moment in time that is making a historical time period. Right now, you are living in a new time period about COVID-19. All right, guys. Now you will see that I've created a civil rights movement error. Now, what that means is I started in chronological order with 1896 with a court case. That court case led to segregation. Now, if you remember, segregation was a group of people went over here and another group went over here. They couldn't communicate, they couldn't talk, and it was very frowned upon. Now, you will remember in February, we talked about two very important people. We talked about Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. Now, Rosa Parks led a peaceful protest on that bus. Now, if you remember, a peaceful protest did not bring harm to somebody else. They protested what was right, but didn't hurt anybody. So if you're going to protest, the way to do it is to not hurt anybody. So all she did was the bus had two sections on it, a part for colored people and a part for Caucasians. She had worked a long, long time, was tired, and the back of the bus was full. So she sat down in a seat and fought for the rights to be able to sit there. She ended up having to spend one night in jail over that, but it was an important time in history. And then you will see in 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. starts to lead a march in Washington, D.C. to fight for equal rights again in America. And that we can, from that moment in history, created the future that we live in now, that we get to be a awesome school community with so many different cultures and so many different things to offer people, because people were brave like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King, who stood up for what was right. And now, in our time, we get to learn from other cultures and embrace people and be friends with people that are different from us. And that is a wonderful thing that we get to do. So you will see that I've created a timeline of those events during that time period that set our future, or our time period now, that we get to be involved in a time that doesn't have segregation. We get to go to a school with all these wonderful people who create a wonderful culture and who always has something new and amazing to offer us that we can learn from. All right, guys, that is the end of my lesson. I hope you guys learned something about a primary source and a secondary source. That, remember, primary source comes from you and secondary source comes from somebody else. Remember, most important part is the primary source, because that's the most reliable. It came from the actual person. And a time period is an event that happened over a period of time, that it changed from what used to be to what it was, or to what it's going to be. It changed the future. And so right now, you are living in a new time period, a time before COVID-19 and the time after COVID-19. So guys, I challenge you guys to make your primary sources, make your journal entries, tell me about how you feel, tell me what your family did, how school is different now, because you are primary sources and you are living through a moment in history. All right, guys, I'll see you next week. Have an amazing week. Bye, guys.